The restaurant was built to separate the powerful from the forgotten. The restaurant was not just expensive, it was designed to remind people who mattered and who did not. The lights were soft, but never warm enough to feel welcoming. They created shadows instead of comfort, as if even the walls were watching. The chairs were comfortable, yet firm, forcing everyone to sit upright, alert, careful about how they looked and how they spoke. Every table carried quiet confidence, the kind that came from money, influence, or both. This was a place where laughter was controlled, where voices never rose too high, and where mistakes were not forgiven. They were remembered. When she walked in, she already felt out of place, even though she was dressed well. She adjusted her seat, smoothed her dress, and looked around slowly, pretending she belonged there. What hurt the most was not the silence, it was the feeling that everyone else had someone, and she did not. This restaurant did not forgive loneliness, it exposed it. She had spent more time getting ready than she wanted to admit. She had chosen her clothes carefully, not too flashy, not too simple. She practiced calm in the mirror, reminding herself that this was just a dinner, nothing more. A blind date was supposed to be harmless, she told herself, a chance to start fresh. As she sat there, she replayed those thoughts again and again, using them to keep her posture steady and her expression neutral. Inside, however, her chest felt tight. She checked her phone without lifting it too high, not wanting to look impatient. She believed that if she stayed calm, if she stayed hopeful, the night would reward her. She did not yet understand that some nights were never meant to be kind. At first, time passed normally. 5 minutes felt like 5 minutes, but soon it stretched and slowed, becoming heavy. Every glance at the door brought a small wave of hope, followed by quiet disappointment. Conversations from other tables drifted past her ears. Laughter, low voices, the sound of glasses touching. Couples leaned toward each other, sharing private smiles. Business partners nodded seriously over expensive drinks. She sat still, hands folded, feeling like the only person not moving forward. Time did not rush for her. It waited, forcing her to feel every second. The chair across from her was perfectly arranged, clean, untouched, waiting. At first, she ignored it. Then she noticed it. Then she couldn't stop noticing it. It became a reminder of what was missing. The waiter passed by twice, politely smiling, already aware of the situation. She imagined what people were thinking, whether they believed she had been stood up or whether they thought she was the one waiting for forgiveness. The chair said nothing, yet it spoke louder than anyone else in the room. She had learned long ago how to hide disappointment. She lifted her chin slightly, controlled her breathing, and kept her expression calm. Even as her thoughts grew restless, she forced herself to appear composed. She did not want pity. She did not want attention. All she wanted was dignity. The restaurant demanded it. Still, inside her, something fragile began to crack. She wondered why she had agreed to come. She wondered why she had believed this would be different from the others. When her phone vibrated, her heart reacted before her mind did. For a brief moment, hope returned, sharp and sudden. She picked up the phone slowly, careful not to appear desperate. The message was short, cold, final. He wasn't coming. No excuse, no apology, just absence delivered in a sentence. The words blurred for a moment as she read them again, as if repetition might change their meaning. It didn't. The message stayed cruelly clear. Her throat tightened and she swallowed hard. Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Crying here meant surrender. It meant confirming every silent judgment in the room. She placed the phone face down on the table, as though hiding it might undo what had just happened. Her hands trembled slightly, so she folded them together, pressing them gently against each other until they steadied. Pain did not announce itself loudly. It settled quietly, like a weight on her chest. Only then did another realization arrive, slower but heavier. She had come expecting someone else to handle the bill. She checked her bag discreetly, knowing already what she would find. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. The situation tightened around her, closing like a trap she hadn't seen coming. Being abandoned hurt. Being trapped hurt more. She looked around again, not for help, but for escape, knowing neither would come easily. People noticed, they always did. A glance held too long, a whisper behind a glass, a smile that was not kind. The room subtly adjusted its attention toward her table. No one said anything openly, but she could feel the shift. Judgment did not shout, it observed. She felt smaller with every passing moment, though she did everything she could to remain still, dignified, unbroken. At the far end of the restaurant, away from the light and noise, a man sat quietly. He had arrived earlier than everyone else, and unlike the others, he did not need attention to feel powerful. He watched without staring, observed without reacting. When he noticed her, it wasn't pity that held his gaze, it was recognition. He understood situations like this. He understood silence, humiliation, and control. As she sat there, trying not to disappear, the Mafia Boss made no move. Not yet. Some moments needed to unfold fully before they could be claimed. The waiter did not walk toward her table immediately. He paused first, standing just far enough away to observe, to confirm what he already suspected. When he finally stepped closer, his smile was trained, practiced, and careful. It was the kind of smile meant to avoid conflict, not to offer comfort. His voice stayed low when he spoke, respectful but firm, shaped by years of dealing with situations that required quiet control. He asked if she was ready to order again, though they both knew the question carried another meaning. She nodded politely, even as her stomach tightened. The waiter glanced briefly at the empty chair, then back at her, and in that short moment, everything was understood without being said. She tried to explain calmly. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully, as if tone alone could change reality. She told him her guest was running late, that there had been a misunderstanding, that she would just need a little more time. Each sentence felt thinner than the last. The waiter listened, nodding, but his eyes gave him away. He had heard similar stories before. Her voice did not shake, but it lacked confidence, and in a place like this, confidence was everything. When she finished speaking, silence filled the space between them, heavy and uncomfortable. As the waiter stepped back, people around them leaned in slightly, pretending not to notice while noticing everything. Conversations slowed, laughter softened, the atmosphere shifted in small, almost invisible ways. Judgment moved through the room like cold air, touching everyone before settling on her table. She felt it in her shoulders, in the way her back stiffened, in the way she avoided looking around. This restaurant did not allow weakness. It tolerated it long enough to expose it. From his seat in the shadows, the Mafia Boss felt the shift before he saw it. Power always sensed tension. He noticed how the waiter's posture changed, how his movements became careful, controlled. He noticed how the room leaned toward a quiet moment of discomfort. His eyes returned to her. She had not raised her voice, she had not begged, she had not made herself smaller than necessary. That restraint told him more than words ever could. This was not someone careless, this was someone cornered. At a nearby table, a low laugh slipped through the quiet. Someone whispered something sharp, something meant to wound without being heard clearly. The tone carried amusement, not sympathy. The sound landed like a small cut. She heard it, even if she pretended not to. Her jaw tightened slightly, the only sign that it had reached her. The cruelty was casual, effortless, the kind people used when they believed there would be no consequences. Her breathing became more deliberate as she fought the urge to leave. Running would mean defeat. Staying meant endurance. She chose to stay. She reminded herself that dignity was not given, it was held. Even so, the weight of humiliation pressed down on her, quiet but heavy. Her eyes dropped briefly to the table, tracing the edge of her glass, grounding herself in small details just to stay present. The sound was not loud. It did not need to be. The glass met the table with a calm, deliberate motion. Deliberate motion that carried authority. One of his men noticed immediately, then another. The Mafia boss did not look away from her when he did it. His expression did not change. But in that single action, a decision had been made. He had seen enough. There were no words exchanged, no signals obvious to anyone else. Still, the men near him adjusted their posture instinctively, their attention sharpened. This was not panic, it was readiness. The Mafia boss remained seated for a moment longer, allowing the room to continue as it was, allowing the discomfort to fully ripen. Some lessons needed an audience. The restaurant owner, standing near the bar, noticed the shift next. He recognized the subtle signs, the stillness, the tension, the way certain men stopped pretending to relax. His eyes moved quickly to the corner table, and recognition hit him like ice. His face drained of color. Whatever problem was forming in his restaurant was no longer small, and it was no longer his to control. When the Mafia boss arose from his seat, he did it slowly, not to draw attention, but because he didn't need to rush. His presence changed the room without effort. Conversations stopped, chairs stilled. Even those who did not know exactly who he was felt the authority in the air. He adjusted his jacket calmly, his expression unreadable, and began to walk toward her table. Every step was measured. Every eye followed him. The moment had arrived, and the room understood it instinctively. She felt him before she saw him. The air around her table shifted, growing heavier, quieter, as though the restaurant itself had decided to hold its breath. A shadow stretched across the tablecloth, long and steady. She lifted her eyes slowly, not out of curiosity, but instinct. Standing there was a man who did not belong to uncertainty. His posture was calm, grounded, unmovable. He did not look angry. He did not look kind. He looked certain, and certainty in a place like this was power. No one announced his arrival. No one needed to. Conversations faded naturally, like candles being blown out one by one. Even the soft music in the background felt suddenly inappropriate, as if it had overstayed its welcome. People froze in their seats, unsure whether to look or look away. Those who recognized him kept their eyes low. Those who didn't felt the warning anyway. Silence wrapped itself around the moment, thick and unavoidable. He didn't glance at the waiter. He didn't acknowledge the empty chair. He didn't scan the room for reactions. His attention rested fully on her, steady and unreadable. That alone unsettled her. She had expected questions, judgment, maybe even pity. Instead, she found herself seen, not as a situation, but as a person. His gaze carried no rush, no impatience. It waited, as though time belonged to him. Without thinking, she adjusted her posture. She lifted her chin slightly, not in defiance, but in self-respect. Something about his presence demanded it. He did not ask her to explain. He did not pressure her to speak. And in that silence, she felt strangely safer than she had moments before. Whatever was happening, she sensed it was no longer spiraling out of her control. It was being taken from her, and that brought relief. His voice was low, calm, and precise. It did not rise above the room. It didn't need to. The words were not harsh, but they were final. The waiter hesitated for half a second, instinctively glancing toward the owner, but the Mafia boss did not repeat himself. He did not look at the waiter again, and that was enough. The waiter nodded quickly and stepped away, his movements careful, respectful, relieved. The Mafia boss pulled out the chair across from her and sat down slowly, deliberately. The movement was unhurried, almost ceremonial. The chair that had symbolized absence now held presence, heavy, undeniable presence. The balance of the table shifted. The humiliation that had filled the space moments ago began to dissolve, replaced by something far more powerful: control. She did not know who he was, not officially, not yet, but she felt the weight of him in the way the room reacted, in the way people avoided looking too closely, in the way even the staff moved differently now. He carried authority that didn't announce itself. It simply existed, and she sat across from it, unsure whether to feel fear, gratitude, or both. His words were simple, not a question, not an accusation, a statement. She nodded slowly, unsure how much to say, unsure how much he already knew. He did not push her to explain. He did not ask why. People like him did not waste time on details that didn't matter. What mattered was what came next. Every eye in the room was drawn toward them, though most pretended otherwise. Phones stayed in pockets, glasses hovered midair. This was not curiosity anymore, it was awareness. Something important was unfolding, something no one wanted to interrupt. The restaurant that once judged her now watched her with caution. The power dynamic had flipped completely. He leaned forward slightly, just enough for his voice to reach only her. His eyes burned with quiet intensity, not anger, not desire, intention. He whispered, "Let them watch." The words sent a slow chill through her, not from fear, but from realization. This was not about saving her from embarrassment. This was about making a point, a lesson, for everyone. At first, she didn't fully understand what he meant. The words, "let them watch," echoed in her mind, slow and heavy. She glanced around carefully, noticing the stillness she hadn't seen before. Faces that once carried quiet judgment now carried caution. Shoulders that had been relaxed were tense. The restaurant had changed without moving a single chair. Only then did she realize that his words were not meant for her alone. They were meant for the room, for everyone who had watched her suffer in silence. The restaurant owner finally gathered the courage to walk toward their table. His steps were hesitant, his posture no longer confident. This was his establishment, yet it no longer belonged to him. He stopped a respectful distance away, hands clasped together, his voice carefully controlled. He addressed the Mafia Boss first, ignoring her completely, not out of disrespect, but instinct. Power always recognized power. The owner spoke softly, apologizing for the inconvenience, explaining things that no longer mattered. The Mafia Boss listened without reacting. He let the man speak until his words ran out on their own. Only then did he slowly lift his eyes. That single motion carried more weight than shouting ever could. The owner's explanation ended immediately. His voice was steady, unhurried, almost casual. "The bill is covered." He did not say how, he did not say by whom. He didn't need to. The owner nodded instantly, relief washing over his face. The problem was solved, but the lesson was just beginning. The Mafia Boss was not here to fix a mistake quietly. He was here to reshape the memory of the room. Wine arrived, expensive, rare, unnecessary. Plates followed, arranged perfectly. The Mafia Boss made the choices effortlessly, not to impress her, but to establish something clear: control. She watched silently, unsure whether to stop him, unsure whether she even wanted to. No one questioned the order. No one hesitated. The staff moved as if rehearsed, grateful to obey. She felt her earlier shame begin to fade, replaced with something steadier. Not pride, not confidence. Stillness, the kind that came when panic no longer had a place to sit. Her hands rested calmly on the table now. Her breathing slowed. The night that had threatened to break her was being rewritten right in front of her, and she was no longer the weakest person in the room. The table that had laughed earlier stayed quiet. Eyes remained lowered. The cruel whispers had disappeared completely, swallowed by fear and regret. The restaurant had learned its mistake. Watching her now was no longer entertainment. It was a reminder. The Mafia Boss did not need to punish anyone openly. The silence was punishment enough. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said, just loud enough for her to hear. The words landed gently, but they carried weight far beyond comfort. They restored something that had been taken from her. Not dignity, but truth. She hadn't failed. She hadn't embarrassed herself. She had been abandoned. and abandonment was not weakness. What struck her most was not the luxury or the attention, it was the shift in story. Moments ago, she had been the woman left behind. Now, she was the woman chosen. The difference was subtle but powerful. The Mafia Boss had not erased what happened, he had reframed it. He had turned humiliation into authority simply by sitting down. As he leaned back again, she noticed something important. His eyes did not burn with anger, they burned with intent. He wasn't reacting, he was deciding. Whatever brought him to act tonight went deeper than kindness or impulse. This was someone who understood balance, control, and consequence, and somehow she had stepped into his line of sight at exactly the wrong, or right, moment. After he leaned back slightly, the room seemed to hold its breath. No one spoke, no one moved unnecessarily. Even the faint clinking of cutlery felt muted. In this silence, she felt both exposed and protected at the same time. She could hear her own heartbeat clearly, a steady reminder that she was alive, present, and yet observed. His presence filled the space without effort, and for the first time that evening, she did not feel completely alone. As he rested one hand lightly on the edge of the table, she couldn't help but notice the contrast of calm authority against the earlier tension. The weight of his hand was not oppressive, it was deliberate, measured, a silent signal that he was in control. The gesture communicated more than words ever could. It reassured her, asserted dominance, and reminded everyone in the room that this man's attention could shift the balance of power in an instant. Even the staff, who had seen countless patrons and countless mistakes, now moved with instinctive deference. Plates were refilled without question, orders were anticipated, and movements became almost choreographed. It wasn't fear that guided them, it was recognition of authority. Quiet, but undeniable. They knew not to interfere, yet to remain ready, as if anticipating his smallest gesture or glance. The wine he ordered was precise, expensive, rare, and perfectly selected. It wasn't meant to impress anyone, least of all her, yet it subtly communicated status, discernment, and control. She watched silently as the waiter brought it over, feeling the shift in atmosphere deepen. Each movement was deliberate. Nothing about him was rushed, nothing was unnecessary. Every choice he made reinforced the understanding that he dictated the tone of the room. It wasn't literal, of course, but it felt that way. Conversations stopped mid-word, people's posture straightened, chairs no longer squeaked or shifted carelessly. It was as though the restaurant itself acknowledged his presence and deferred, bending the environment to his will without a single explicit command. The contrast between the earlier judgmental energy and the current respect was stark, almost frightening in its clarity. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes tracked her subtly, noting the small movements, the way she drew a breath, the slight tension in her shoulders. She felt watched in a way that was neither intrusive nor cruel. It was meticulous. Every small action she took seemed measured against the quiet intensity of his gaze. And yet, strangely, the weight of that awareness offered a sense of safety she hadn't expected. What had been laughter, judgment, and casual observation transformed into something new. Respect, caution, and tension. People who had whispered, smirked, or glanced at her with amusement now sat still, aware of a presence far larger than themselves. The air became dense, every movement amplified, every whispered remark stifled before it could escape. She realized that she had stepped into an entirely different space, one dictated by him. Even among the tables that didn't know him personally, a subtle acknowledgement began to ripple outward. It was felt rather than seen. Lowered eyes, softer voices, tentative smiles now abandoned. Respect had a weight, and it had arrived in full. She watched it unfold silently, understanding that her situation, once humiliating, had been reframed entirely by his intervention. She no longer feared whispers or judgments. He had claimed the space around her with quiet precision, No one would speak carelessly now. No one would act thoughtlessly. In that moment, the subtle power of protection was more potent than words or gestures. She realized that his attention was not fleeting. It was deliberate, structured, and entirely focused. For the first time that evening, she felt truly secure. It wasn't aggression, it wasn't loud, and it wasn't a threat. It was a presence, heavy and precise, like gravity. The air seemed to hum differently, the room itself bending imperceptibly toward his control. She felt it around her, in the quiet, in the glances, in the careful steps of every staff member and patron nearby. That invisible force of dominance reshaped the entire restaurant, marking her as under his protection and everyone else as secondary. Finally, his voice broke the silence, calm, deliberate, low enough that only she could fully feel its weight. He spoke about how power was exercised, measured, precise, and invisible when done correctly, not through shouting or intimidation, but through awareness and calculated restraint. She listened, intrigued and unnerved, realizing that this man was teaching lessons to the room and to her simultaneously, without raising his tone or making a single demand. Every word he spoke carried authority, yet it wasn't cruel. She felt a chill, recognizing that this man could be merciless if he chose. At the same time, there was a strange relief. He wasn't here to punish her. He was here to command the room, to assert his will, and in doing so, he had shielded her entirely. It was a contradiction she couldn't quite process: fear and comfort, control and safety, all entwined in his presence. The group who had mocked her earlier no longer dared speak, their whispers dying mid-thought. Their confidence dissolved under the unspoken power he wielded. She noticed how their eyes flickered nervously towards him, realizing that the man in the shadows was not to be underestimated. The subtle dominance he exerted had rewritten the social rules of the room without raising a voice. When he spoke again, she felt it in her chest as much as in her ears. Every syllable was measured, deliberate, almost hypnotic. His calm amplified his authority. No need for theatrics, no need for shouting. The room itself responded, adjusting instinctively, as if the walls were attuned to his presence. She couldn't look away. She didn't want to. His control was absolute, quiet, and complete. He spoke to her, yet she had no obligation to reply. It was a lesson in patience and observation. He allowed her to process his presence, his words, and the weight of the environment around them. In doing so, he made her aware of something she had not understood before. Power did not always demand compliance. Sometimes it simply required acknowledgement. The room had shifted, and she understood why. The lesson wasn't loud and it wasn't immediate. It unfolded in the quiet space between gestures, glances, and deliberate stillness. Power had its own language, one that didn't rely on threat or display. She absorbed it slowly, realizing that the events of this night were not random, but carefully orchestrated by someone who knew how to control more than just people. He controlled perception itself. Those who had whispered and smirked earlier now understood the stakes. The subtle authority he carried reminded them that disrespect, even if subtle, carried consequences. She watched their posture adjust, their gazes soften, their movements deliberate. It wasn't fear alone that had changed them, it was recognition of a force far beyond themselves. Though the room had shifted under his silent authority, he never left her behind. His eyes traced her movements, noting every micro-expression, every slight change in posture. She felt truly seen, not as a guest, not as a victim, but as someone he had chosen to observe and protect. The sensation was overwhelming, yet grounding. She had never known attention to carry both safety and intensity. Even the smallest gesture, a hand adjusting a glass, a slow shift in posture, was enough to redirect the focus of the room. People moved instinctively to accommodate him, aware that any mistake, however subtle, would disrupt the balance he maintained. The sheer power of such measured presence was mesmerizing and terrifying in equal measure. As she sat across from him, she began to perceive the invisible framework governing the space. Every glance, every silence, every micro-gesture had meaning. The rules weren't spoken aloud, yet breaking them would be impossible without consequences. And yet, paradoxically, she felt safe within their boundaries. The Mafia Boss's control had rewritten the narrative. She was no longer a passive observer, but a participant under his watchful guidance. The silence returned, thicker than before. It wasn't awkward or uncertain, it was deliberate, the kind of quiet that only appears when everyone senses that something important is unfolding. Even the faint music in the background seemed to fade, as if the room itself was listening. She felt the weight of that stillness press gently against her chest, not suffocating, but demanding attention. This was not a moment to rush. This was a moment to endure. His fingers brushed the table, not tapping, not gripping, just resting. Yet the effect was immediate. The waiter who had been approaching slowed and stopped. A conversation 2 tables away died instantly. She realized then that his authority was not tied to force, it was tied to awareness. Everyone was watching him, whether they meant to or not, and he knew it. She straightened her posture, lifted her chin slightly, and reminded herself to breathe evenly. Inside, her thoughts raced, but outwardly, she remained composed. He noticed. Of course he did. His gaze lingered for a fraction longer, not judging, not approving, simply observing. It felt as though he was measuring how much pressure she could withstand without breaking. This was not a man who tolerated carelessness. Small mistakes, he knew, were the ones that revealed weakness. The way people sat, spoke, even glanced in his direction, all of it mattered. The room had adjusted accordingly. No one laughed too loudly. No one spoke out of turn. The discipline was unspoken but absolute. A glance toward the bar quieted a group instantly. A slight tilt of his head redirected a waiter without a word exchanged. She watched it all unfold, stunned by how effortlessly he commanded obedience. It was power refined to its purest form, invisible, efficient, unquestioned. The realization unsettled her. Being under his protection also meant being under his influence. The comfort she felt came with boundaries she hadn't agreed to, but instinctively accepted. And yet, she didn't resist. Something about his certainty made resistance feel unnecessary, even foolish. Earlier, she had felt exposed, dissected by curious glances and silent mockery. Now, those same eyes avoided her entirely, fixed instead on the man who had shifted the balance of the room. She was no longer the subject of scrutiny. She was the space he occupied, and that made all the difference. When the restaurant owner finally approached, his confidence dissolved the closer he came. His smile was tight, rehearsed, respectful to the point of submission. He spoke carefully, choosing each word as though it might carry consequences. The Mafia Boss acknowledged him with a nod, nothing more. It was enough. People still spoke, but only when necessary. Whispers were brief, cautious, stripped of humor. No one wanted to be remembered for saying the wrong thing in a room controlled by a man who never forgot. She sensed it clearly. Tonight would linger in people's memories long after the plates were cleared. She had always imagined power as loud, voices raised, fists slammed, tempers flaring. What she saw now challenged everything she believed. This power did not announce itself. It settled, it observed, it waited. And when it acted, the world adjusted without protest. It wasn't warmth, it wasn't kindness, it was acknowledgement. That faint smile carried more meaning than a speech ever could. It told the room that he was satisfied, for now. It told her that she had passed some unspoken test, though she didn't yet know what the test had been. She searched his face for answers and found none. No anger, no softness, only intent. Whatever had drawn his attention to her wasn't pity, and it wasn't coincidence. It was choice, and choices made by men like him were never accidental. He didn't shield her from their gaze. He allowed it, controlled it. Let them see who sat with him. Let them understand the boundary that now existed. The message was clear without being spoken. She was not to be touched, judged, or dismissed. The realization sent a pulse through her chest. She was part of something larger now, something dangerous and undefined. Fear crept in, but it didn't overpower her. It sharpened her senses, made every second feel heavier, more real. When he adjusted his chair, the movement seemed deliberate, almost ceremonial. Space shifted around him, accommodating his presence without resistance. She noticed how people leaned back, how pathways subtly cleared. No one wanted to cross him, even accidentally. A laugh rose too high near the entrance, then stopped. Apologies followed. Not to her, to him. Always to him. She began to grasp the depth of his influence. This wasn't local, this wasn't situational. This was a reputation that walked into rooms before he did. The air felt different on her skin, heavier, calmer, charged. She wasn't invisible anymore, but she wasn't exposed either. She existed in a protected space, one carved out by his presence alone. Steady, unmoving, grounded. Those hands had likely done terrible things, and decisive ones, yet now they simply rested there, holding the moment in place, anchoring the night. The loneliness that had followed her into the restaurant had dissolved completely, replaced not by companionship, but by alignment. Someone had seen her, chosen to intervene, and altered the course of her evening, perhaps more. By now, there was no doubt. The staff, the guests, even the walls seemed to accept it. This night belonged to him, and by extension, so did the space around her. He leaned just enough for his voice to reach her and no one else. It wasn't a secret meant to be hidden, it was a boundary meant to be understood. The words were few, calm, and controlled. He didn't ask how she felt, he didn't ask why she was there alone. He spoke as though he already knew, as though answers were unnecessary. Without realizing it, she moved closer. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, curiosity pulled her forward, mixed with the strange certainty that this was a moment she couldn't step away from. The table between them felt smaller now, like a formality rather than a barrier. She became aware that nothing escaped his notice. The way her hands rested in her lap, the hesitation before she spoke, the way her breath caught when the room grew too quiet. He absorbed it all without reacting, cataloging information the way powerful men did, calmly, patiently. He wasn't testing her kindness or courage. He was watching how she responded under pressure, how she held herself when the room turned still, how she reacted when attention shifted away from her and towards him. These details mattered more than words ever could. When a nearby table grew too loud again, he didn't look their way. He didn't need to. Someone else corrected it for him. Authority like his didn't require constant maintenance. It had already been established. He allowed the moment to continue uninterrupted. When she adjusted her chair, his gaze flickered. When she hesitated before lifting her glass, he noticed. It wasn't invasive, it was precise, as if he were mapping the rhythm of her presence, learning where she fit within the space he controlled. No weapons were visible, no threats were spoken, and yet everyone felt it. The kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. The kind that lived in reputation, in consequence, in memory. She wondered how many rooms had felt like this before she ever stepped into one. It didn't make sense, but it was real. The earlier humiliation, the loneliness, the uncertainty, all of it faded beneath the steady certainty of his presence. Whatever else he was deliberate, and deliberate men did not allow chaos near what they had chosen to protect. Even when he fell silent again, the room stayed balanced. Nothing unraveled, nothing escalated. His presence alone was enough to hold everything in place, like a weight keeping the world from tipping. Time moved differently now, slower, more intentional. Courses arrived without being announced. Glasses were refilled without interruption. The night, which had begun with embarrassment, now unfolded with controlled calm. When he wanted something, he didn't ask loudly. A nod, a pause, a glance. The result followed immediately. she realized that control was not about domination. It was not judging, not criticizing, studying, learning how she adapted, how she breathed when the silence stretched, how her shoulders relaxed when she realized no one was laughing anymore. He was paying attention in a way few ever had. No one checked in too often, no one asked unnecessary questions. The staff moved like shadows now, efficient and invisible. They understood this was not a table to interrupt. Not to impress her, not to show wealth, simply because the night was not finished. Because leaving too early would suggest urgency, and urgency was something he never displayed. She found herself sitting straighter, breathing deeper. The room no longer felt hostile. It felt neutral, controlled. She realized that confidence didn't always come from within. Sometimes it came from knowing someone powerful had decided you mattered. He didn't perform, he existed, and that was enough. Every person in the room adjusted themselves around him, unconsciously accepting their place within his orbit. Some watched quietly, some avoided looking altogether, some pretended nothing unusual was happening. But all of them understood tonight had rules, and breaking them would not end well. Being chosen by someone like him meant safety, but it also meant visibility. She was no longer invisible, and invisibility, she realized, had once been her shield. She didn't know what would happen after this night. She didn't know what he wanted or what this moment would become, but one truth settled firmly in her chest. She would not be abandoned again tonight. At last, he broke the silence, but not with volume or force. His words were precise, deliberate, each one carrying weight far beyond the sound itself. She leaned in slightly, unsure what he would say, aware that every syllable might shift the balance of the night. There was no urgency in his voice, only a quiet command, a reassurance that control was absolute, and the room had to obey, whether it realized it or not. Her heart still raced, but her breathing steadied. She tried to focus on him, but the sheer intensity of his presence made her senses hyper-aware. Every subtle movement, a shift in his posture, the way his fingers tapped lightly against the table, carried meaning she didn't yet understand. She was a student to him now, learning rules unspoken, lessons invisible yet undeniably present. No one dared to laugh. No one dared to speak carelessly. The previous mirth, the whispers, the casual glances, all of it had evaporated. The room had been rewritten in an instant, and she now understood that his authority was not just personal, it extended to the air itself, shaping behavior and controlling outcomes without a single raised voice. When he moved his hands, it was almost imperceptible, a shift, a tilt, a small wave, yet it commanded absolute attention. She noticed how those around him immediately adjusted. Glasses stopped clinking, conversations paused mid-word. A simple gesture from him redirected the entire space. She felt the invisible threads of control extend through the room, binding everyone to his intent. The waiters and assistants seemed to anticipate his wishes before they were spoken. Refilled glasses, carefully placed utensils, unnoticed adjustments to chairs, all occurred in near-perfect synchronicity. It wasn't fear, it was acknowledgement. They had been trained, conditioned, or perhaps instinctively recognized that this man's word was law, even if it was unspoken. Despite the tension, a strange calm began to descend over her. She realized she was no longer the center of ridicule, no longer the abandoned, awkward presence. The room had been rearranged by his mere existence. And somewhere in that recalibration, she found comfort. even amidst the underlying fear. She noticed the subtle change in those who had been watching her earlier. Their eyes, once curious or judgmental, now carried something heavier: respect, not only for him, but for her by virtue of her proximity to someone so commanding. She realized then that safety could come not from avoidance, but from alignment with those who wielded true authority. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forceful, it wasn't in the words he spoke, it was in how he occupied the space, how he existed in a room and made everyone else conscious of their own posture, their own movements, their own place in the hierarchy. Presence could be heavier than a weapon. She felt that weight now, not crushing, but undeniable. The threat was implied, unspoken, almost artistic in its subtlety. She could feel it in the careful attentiveness of the staff, in the way patrons avoided eye contact, in the reverence surrounding him. He didn't need to assert it. The possibility alone was enough to shape behavior, to demand obedience, to protect her without threat. Amid all the adjustments, the subtle shifts, the unspoken communications, his eyes remained on her, not in judgment, not in interrogation, but in attention. She could sense that this focus was deliberate, selective, and not to be taken lightly. Whatever decisions would come tonight, she was in his line of sight, and he had chosen to keep her there. Time and space seemed to warp. The restaurant simultaneously felt intimate and expansive. Every movement she made echoed. Every glance she shared with him carried weight beyond comprehension. She realized that proximity to such force changed perception, making small things monumental and monumental things almost imperceptible. A slight curve of his lips, almost imperceptible, shifted the energy. It wasn't warmth, it wasn't friendliness, it was acknowledgement, assurance, and subtle dominance. The room quieted even further, as if the walls themselves had paused. She understood that power could speak without ever uttering a command. She was no longer alone, not because anyone else had approached, not because anyone had spoken, but because his presence enveloped her, protective, observant, absolute. She realized that being watched by someone like him was both terrifying and comforting in equal measure. Everything that had happened, everything that would happen, seemed predetermined by the silent authority of this man. Her role tonight, her choices, the room itself, all had been subtly influenced, directed, and contained by him. She began to understand the quiet inevitability of his power. Nothing about him was casual. A shift of the hand, a glance towards the door, a slow adjustment of his sleeve, all were intentional. Every action carried purpose, revealing nothing by accident. She became aware of how observation alone could dictate behavior and how easily the room bent under it. Fear came naturally. He could undoubtedly enforce consequences. Calm came from the certainty that he was deliberate, measured, and protective. The paradox twisted in her chest, thrilling and unsettling at once. She understood the tension was part of the lesson, part of the power. Those who had earlier scrutinized her, mocked her, or whispered amongst themselves now existed in the shadow of his authority. Their focus shifted, their arrogance tempered, and their judgments quieted. She realized that one person's presence could realign an entire room, a room that once seemed hostile and oppressive. He demonstrated dominance not with fear, but with precision, clarity, and calm. She could observe it, recognize it, and understand it. She saw the rules of power enacted without a single raised voice, a single lash of anger, or a single threat. Control, she realized, was art in its purest form. The quiet was instructive. Every pause, every hesitation, every muted movement communicated what words could not. She understood that silence in the right hands could command respect, instill caution, and protect those under its gaze. Until now, not by anyone, not in the restaurant, not by the guests, not by the staff. His gaze pierced past surface appearances, past embarrassment, past fear. For the first time that night, she was acknowledged in full. Her presence mattered, and someone powerful had noticed. At last, she felt it, a strange, tethered safety that didn't demand compliance, but earned her trust. She realized her isolation, her awkward loneliness, her fear of being unseen had her trust. She realized her isolation, her awkward loneliness, her fear of being unseen had ended not through friendship or conversation, but through his careful, deliberate observation. For the first time, she understood the kind of power that could bend the world silently, protect without interference, and make someone feel noticed simply by existing in the right place at the right moment. The night continued, slow and deliberate, each movement orchestrated by the unspoken rules he carried. The courses arrived, refilled, and were cleared without interruption. The room's energy pulsed around him, bending to his will, yet calm and controlled. Every glance, every gesture, every silence taught her lessons she couldn't yet articulate. She was learning a new language, the language of presence, authority, and careful dominance. And through it all, she knew she would not be left alone again tonight. Whatever had brought her here, whatever chance had aligned her with him, she felt the safety of his watchful eyes. The room was his, the night was his, and she was now, inexplicably, under his protection. She would remember this night forever, not for the embarrassment she had felt, but for the lesson she had learned, that some men wield control so quietly, so deliberately, that the world itself seems to bend to their will, and for once, she was not outside of it. He allowed a moment to pass, letting her adjust to the weight of his attention. She had never felt so simultaneously exposed and protected. The air around them vibrated with quiet authority, subtle yet unshakable, as if every molecule in the room had aligned to his presence. She realized that control didn't need shouting or threats. It existed in the calm, in the deliberate timing of gestures, and in the unwavering gaze that seemed to see everything. She noticed the way he studied the room, not with judgment, but with meticulous awareness. Every patron, every whisper, every movement of the staff was accounted for. His dominance was effortless, and yet it shaped the environment completely. She felt herself drawn deeper into the silent orchestration, understanding that he was teaching lessons she had never imagined she could learn simply by being present. The Mafia Boss's hand shifted slightly on the table, a small, almost imperceptible motion, and yet the change was immediate. Conversations paused, laughter died mid-word, and the world seemed to bend toward him. She understood then that power was not in what was taken by force, but in what was commanded by presence alone. Even fear was unnecessary. Respect and the instinct to obey had been earned in an instant. Her chest tightened as she realized how thoroughly he had recalibrated the room. The energy had shifted, and she, once an object of ridicule and discomfort, was now part of a carefully constructed equilibrium. The room no longer belonged to the impatient, the judgmental, or the careless. It belonged to him, and, by extension, it belonged in a small way to her as well. He leaned forward slightly, not speaking, but making her feel that every thought she had, every small movement, had been observed and cataloged. She could sense the measure of his power in the subtle tilt of his head, in the faint narrowing of his eyes, and in the calm certainty that radiated from him. This was a man who understood consequence, who understood the balance of patience and authority, and who had chosen to include her in the perimeter of his influence. The staff moved silently around them, anticipating needs before they were expressed. Glasses were refilled, plates replaced, and every interruption was prevented without a word. She realized that they had been trained to recognize his authority instinctively, to act on intuition rather than instruction. The efficiency was hypnotic, and it allowed her to feel a strange sense of normalcy in the chaos of emotions swelling inside her. She glanced around, noting the way the patrons now behaved. Eyes lowered, shoulders straightened, murmurs silenced. No one dared challenge the invisible command he exerted. She understood then the full scope of the control he held, not just of space, but of the perception of every person within it. Fear was a tool, but so was patience. Subtlety was a weapon, and he wielded it masterfully. A small, deliberate smile crossed his face, and she felt the tension in her chest ease slightly. It was not warmth, but acknowledgement, a silent assurance that she was accounted for, protected, and observed. The room itself seemed to respond to that fraction of a gesture. Every subtle motion of his body communicated meaning beyond words, and she understood the depth of lessons being taught simply through presence. Time seemed to slow. She noticed the careful pacing of each course, the deliberate movements of every hand, the rhythm of every action orchestrated by his silent authority. Nothing was accidental. Every pause, every step, every glance contributed to the intricate structure he had imposed on the room. And she, once overwhelmed and vulnerable, now moved within that structure with a growing awareness of her own place. Her fear began to transform into a tentative confidence. She understood the paradox of being seen, yet protected, observed, yet safe. The Mafia Boss did not need to speak loudly to enforce rules. They were understood instinctively, and through that understanding, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: belonging. Not just to the room, not just to his attention, but to the invisible, precise order he had created. She felt a weight settle on her shoulders, not oppressive, but grounding. His authority had created a space in which she could exist without judgment, a space where she was noticed, where she mattered, and where she was shielded from the careless cruelties of the world. She realized that safety and control could coexist in ways she had never imagined. His gaze softened slightly, not in emotion, but in recognition. She understood that this was a moment of subtle acceptance, not of sentiment, but of acknowledgement. She had passed through the threshold of anonymity into a sphere defined by his attention, and she would not be unknown again tonight. As the evening continued, the hum of the restaurant persisted, yet it carried a new rhythm. The quiet was measured, each movement orchestrated by the unseen threads of his authority. She could feel the lessons unfolding: patience, observation, understanding, the unspoken balance between fear and respect. And she absorbed them not as commands, but as a narrative, unfolding naturally around her. She noticed the micro-adjustments, the way the waiter's hand hovered before placing a plate, the subtle straightening of a patron's posture, the gentle lowering of a voice in conversation. Each action, small but deliberate, was part of the choreography, and she understood that she had shaped the entire space without overt display. Her own movements became more deliberate, her gestures more controlled. She realized she had internalized the rhythm he set, that she now existed within the order he created. The tension that had once constrained her loosened, replaced by the awareness that she was part of something larger than herself, guided by someone who understood the weight of authority. The night stretched on, measured and deliberate. He remained a constant, silent force, calm, observant, and inexorably in control. She felt the lessons take root within her: the art of patience, the command of presence, the quiet enforcement of respect. Every glance he cast, every subtle movement he made, imparted understanding without a single word. By the end of the evening, she was no longer the same person who had walked through the doors hours earlier. She had been exposed to scrutiny, to observation, and to authority unlike anything she had experienced. And yet, she had survived, learned, and been protected all at once. She felt a profound shift, a recognition that true power did not need to shout, that presence could dominate without threat, and that being seen by the right person meant the course of a night, and perhaps a life, could change. Finally, he allowed the tension to ease just enough for her to breathe fully. She knew she had been noticed, accounted for, and preserved within the boundaries he chose to establish. The restaurant, the people, the world around her, all had shifted to accommodate him, and through that, they had shifted for her as well. She realized that her night of isolation, her fear of being alone, and her vulnerability had ended in the most unexpected way. As they rose to leave, she glanced around one last time. The hum of the restaurant had returned, but the memory of his presence lingered, a silent authority that would remain with her far beyond tonight. And she understood the truth. Some men wield control so quietly, so deliberately, that the world bends without resistance, and being chosen by such a man meant you were never truly alone again. She stepped out into the night, carrying the weight of what she had witnessed, the lessons absorbed, and the protection silently offered. The streets were dark, but the memory of his eyes, deliberate and unwavering, burned brightly in her mind. She had entered the evening invisible, abandoned, and unsure. She left understood, acknowledged, and indelibly marked by power, a presence that had chosen her, and in doing so had rewritten everything she thought she knew about authority, fear, and safety.